What's up, y'all? Jordan Hall, and I know the question that's on your mind is, how much money do I need to buy a house? That's a question going through a lot of people's mind right now. Buying a house has gotten more expensive and more difficult than ever. The typical first-time home buyer age has now ballooned to 38 years old. Most people are 40 years old before they're buying their first house. And one of the big reasons for that is that houses have gotten way more expensive. And one of the big barriers to buying a house is the money that you need to save up in advance before you can buy the house. So in this video, I'm going to try to look at specific numbers to tell you pretty close exactly how much money you need to have saved up before you buy your first house. Now, this is going to vary a little bit from area to area across the country, but we should be able to get pretty close. And that way, even if you don't have this amount of money saved up yet, you know what you've got to do in your own personal financial life to get to a point where you can buy a house. We know that homeowners have net worths that are 40 times higher on average than renters. So in the long run, you want to be a homeowner if you can be, and I believe that you can be, and we're going to look at the numbers it's going to take to get you there, all right? And before we get started, a little bit about my philosophy in home buying and home ownership. I am not about getting you into a house that you can't afford in the long term. I'm not about just getting you into a house. I'm about helping you purchase a house that is going to help you build wealth and enhance your life overall for as long as you own it. So my philosophy differs a little bit from some other folks, and I'm not about you getting into a house with the minimum, no down payment or low down payment. I'm about getting you into a house with a down payment and in a position that's going to help you build wealth long term. So that's how we're going to approach this. So first of all, there are three main components, three main buckets of money you're going to need in order to buy your first house. You've got your down payment. Most loans are going to require a down payment. You've got your closing costs. That's the costs that are associated with closing on the loan and making the purchase that you're going to need to bring to the table. And then finally, I'm going to recommend, and most good financial advisors are going to recommend, that you need to have a fully funded emergency fund in place before you buy a house. Because I promise you, once you buy a house, you got a whole bunch of additional liabilities that you're going to have to potentially cover, and you're going to need some money to cover that. So let's take these things in turn, shall we? First of all, down payment wise. Now, as far as home price for first-time home buyers, the best data I could find from about a year ago was that the typical starter home was running nationwide about $243,000. Now that's probably gone up a little bit, probably between $250,000 and $300,000 on average. The typical home sold in America last year was about $400,000, but that's all homes. That's not starter homes. We're speaking specifically to starter homes where we're starting our journey. So I'm going to be conservative, and I'm going to assume that you can buy your starter house for $300,000. Most parts of the country you can do that. Some parts that'd be prohibitive, but most parts of the country you can buy a starter house in the $300,000 range. I'm, of course, going to recommend that you do so. If you're borrowing money, you buy that house with a conventional mortgage. I can't go into detail in this video about the differences between FHA, VA, and conventional, all that, but suffice it to say that the home buyers that are best prepared, in my opinion, use conventional mortgages. Now, conventional requirements require you to put down a little bit more money than government loans like FHA and VA, and that's one of the reasons I recommend them. You can get into a house with a conventional loan for as low as 5%. That is the bare minimum that I would recommend. Really, I would prefer that you put at least 10% down. And briefly, why I believe that is once you buy a house, a lot of different things can happen. Sometimes your life changes, sometimes your job changes, sometimes your family status changes, any number of things. But I've dealt with a lot of people who have purchased a house one year and needed to sell it the next. If you need to sell your house in a hurry within the first 1 or 2 years of ownership, odds are that you've not paid down the mortgage very much, and odds are that it's not appreciated a ton in value. AKA, you don't have a ton of equity in that house. Really, most of the equity that you have is going to be equity that you started with, your down payment. So I recommend you put at least 10% down. That way you know you've always got the equity to get out of the house if you need to in a hurry. Like I said, you could do as low as 5%, but I strongly recommend you put at least 10% down. So in our example, if we're borrowing $300,000 to buy a house, we're purchasing a house for $300,000, you're going to need to bring $30,000 at 10% for a down payment. So we got $30,000 is our first initial bucket of money that we're going to need to save up. Then we're looking at closing costs. Now, your typical closing costs on a deal of about $300,000 on a conventional loan is going to be somewhere around $7,000 or $8,000. Now, remember, closing costs are all the expenses associated with closing the loan. That's how the lender, the originator, gets paid. The mortgage broker, whoever you're using, that pays the closing attorney to do the closing. All that sort of stuff is wrapped up in closing costs. It also generally cedes your escrow accounts for your insurance and taxes going forward, you got to bring all that money to the table. Usually on a conventional loan of this size, it's going to be around $8,000. So we got $30,000 we're bringing to the table as a down payment. We got $8,000 that we'll need to bring for closing costs. Now, there is the possibility that if you've got a good realtor, you could get some of those taken care of by the seller, but we're going to assume that you're paying all the closing costs. So you got $30,000 for down payment, $8,000 for your closing costs. And finally, if you don't have any money otherwise, I strongly recommend before you buy a house that you have a fully funded emergency fund of at least, as most financial advisors say, 3 to 6 months of expenses. For most households, that's going to be around $15,000 to $30,000. And when you buy a house, more than ever is when you need an emergency fund. I can't tell you how many things can and will go wrong when you own a house. Roofs leak, HVAC systems break, windows get broken, septic systems go bad. I mean, there's really no end to the things that can go wrong with a house when you own one. And that's another reason that you really need a fully funded emergency fund, which at minimum is going to be about $15,000. So what's our total at? We got $30,000 that we need for a down payment. We got $8,000 that we may need for closing costs. That's $38,000. And then we got at least $15,000 that we're going to need for an emergency fund. That puts us right around $50K that we're going to need set aside in order to buy a house that is ultimately going to help us build wealth and enhance our life overall. I know that can sound like a lot. I don't know how much you have. Maybe you already have that. Maybe you're ready to go. Maybe you don't have anything and you're going to need to save that up. But I got to stress that that's about what we had when we bought our first house. And thank goodness that we did. It allowed us to put down a healthy down payment. It allowed us to have some money set aside. When we got into our house, we found out there was some termite damage, some other things that had gone wrong. If we did not have that healthy down payment, we would have been up a creek. But if you will follow that advice, if you will put down a healthy down payment, have the money to cover your closing costs or get them covered by your seller, and then most importantly, if you'll have a fully funded emergency fund when you go into homeownership, then I give you great odds that buying and owning a house is going to do nothing but enhance your life and increase your wealth overall. I'd love to know your thoughts on this video. Does this feel completely unrealistic? Does it feel like something you can do? And I want to let you know, I looked at these statistics a little while ago. In 2024, 69% of first-time home buyers had this money, saved up this money on their own. So the majority of them came out of savings. 25% received this money to purchase their home through a gift or a loan from a family member or friends. So some people are saving up for it. Some people are getting some help from family. I don't care how you do it, but do the best you can to save up that $50,000 and you will be ready to buy a house and start building wealth in the long run. Let me know what you thought about this video. Tell me where I'm wrong, what I did right, what else you guys would like to hear. If you're feeling so led, I'd love if you would hit the like button, give me a subscribe, leave a comment below. Tell me how I can do better. I'm always trying to do better for you guys. And in the meantime, I'm Jordan Hall. Thanks for watching.